I'm your host, Rob Trotman. We have Ed Dick and Josh Jeffy. We have a very special guest here to talk a little Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League Barron Cup. It's their 50th anniversary. Really important season. It's a little different this year. And we're glad we can still talk about it. The Barron Cup's still going to be happening here soon. But our next guest, he has 42 years of hockey experience coaching in high school hockey, 459 wins, 6th on the all-time Ohio list, and he's coached Trinity, Chagrin Falls, and Lakewood. He's very involved in USA Hockey. He is head coach of the Lakewood Rangers hockey program, Coach Mark Ferfolia. Coach, thanks for taking time here to join us tonight.
Always a pleasure to get with you guys. I mean, you guys have done such a great job for our Greater Cleveland High School League that, it's whatever time you guys need, certainly.
Well, it's an interesting year with everything going on, but it is the 50th anniversary of the Barron Cup, and we'll get into that here shortly. But, welcome Josh and Ed also in to talk with us here tonight. Guys, thanks for coming on tonight.
Well, it's finally good to see you fellows again. Even with Zoom and not being able to meet, it's still been an adventure these last couple months through the holidays and so on and so forth. So glad to be back. Glad to be with Coach as usual. Just looking forward to hearing how things are going with him. 42 years as a coach, he's seen a lot, but we were kind of talking before we went on. I don't think he's quite seen a season like we've had this year. So a lot of interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, this has been a really interesting one. I was mentioning before we got on the air tonight, it almost seems like baseball in high school where, games get rained out and they're constantly moving the schedules and the athletic directors just have their hands full. And the additional thing that we have at hockey that they don't have is we don't have control of our own facilities. And so it's been that hectic to be able to schedule games. And then you get teams that have to go into quarantine and the new rules for fans. I mean, you mentioned the Zoom here. I mean, I'm going to bet that probably 50 to 60% of the high school fans have watched games this year online as opposed to being in attendance because of the limitations of fans that are able to attend the games. And that's really been kind of tough because, it's always great to play in front of a student crowd and parent crowd. And that's really changed this year. I mean, there's a couple of rinks where there's no fans allowed. So it's been very, very interesting.
Coach, we'll get to more of the overarching things with the Barron Cup as we move forward. But specific to Lakewood, where are you guys at, and talk a little bit about your team and some of the players that you were counting on this year, and maybe some players that that are maybe in the pipeline that may be able to break out either later this year or in the future.
I am really, really pleased with where our kids have come this year. As you're all aware, we graduated a couple of great players last year that are now playing Junior A. And, there was a lot of question as to what we would be like this year graduating those two talents. And we, fortunately, we're young. We only have one senior, Alex Blinky, who does a great job on defense. Plays probably 28 to 30 minutes a game on defense and on the special teams. And one junior who plays a lot, Austin Shearer, on defense. But where we're really blessed is we have 7 sophomores who really, really have stepped up their play. And, last year as freshmen, they were just kind of getting their feet wet playing against the high school kids. And now that they're a year older, a year stronger, a year bigger, I mean, we've had 4, 5 sophomore forwards, for example, Gavin Fielder, whose dad, Billy, used to be a coach at North Olmsted. Gavin's our leading point scorer right now. I think he's got 40 points in 13 games. I mean, he's playing very well. And then we have some other, the names are Eli Ledoux, Jude Johnson, Gavin Fulmer, and Jay Schmolt. They've all done a great job in there for us. We also have Dylan Yatson as on one of our top 2 lines. And in goal, I mean, we graduated a phenomenal, maybe the best goaltender that's been at Lakewood in many, many years in Rob Holden. And Michael Grusella has stepped in and done a very, very nice job. And then we have a couple young players on defense as well. In fact, they're brothers, Gabe and Tanner Constantine, who are regulars on defense and have done just a very, very good job for us. So I'm really pleased with where we've come. We've played very well against our divisional opponents, and actually last weekend went against a couple of white division opponents and played very well. I was very pleased with how we played. So they're coming along well. I think they're only going to get better and better as time goes on, but they need that experience, and that's what we're really hoping to get a little bit more of this year. It's just starting to really happen now. We were shut down for about 3 weeks between between Thanksgiving and about the 14th of December. So we just really got back in starting to play then. So it's been okay though. They're coming along well, practicing well. I mean, today for example, we had a great practice today. The kids were really moving well, and it's just good to see them have that opportunity to skate.
And I think having those young players kind of step up and get that experience, it helps the program in for the long haul. I mean, obviously, it's no secret you share a city with St. Ed's, and their hockey program. The legend speaks for itself. So that's an uphill battle that you're constantly fighting. Not only you guys, but other public schools when it comes to battling again for players with the private school. But having those young players step up and potentially feeding the younger kids that aren't in high school yet on the Lakewood hockey program, that's a really big step that can be made for your program.
Well, you're right, and that really started, I'll tell you, with the two Holden twins when they stayed and played rather than going on and going elsewhere. And then with these sophomores, last year was really the first time that we had a large group of kids that had played open travel hockey elsewhere for the Barons, the Jacks, the Team Ohio, whatever, that stayed and played for their high school. And certainly nothing against St. Ed's. I mean, Timmy Sullivan does a great job. And I was on the other side of that when I was at Trinity, where, you certainly have to recruit kids to come in and play, and they do a good job. And I can't fault them for that. But it's our job to make our program a little bit better and get some of these kids to stay. And now they finally have started to do that, and that's really helped us.
Now, how about this season so far? I know with practice, you talked about it. You need to get in a little bit of the rhythm. How tough has it been? You probably have done, some Zoom conference calls and doing it that way, but then you go, what? You said you had 3 weeks where you couldn't get into the rink, and then you probably have some that you can get in for a little bit, but getting all the kids together and to practice consistently, that probably has to be a little bit of an uphill battle.
It is a real uphill battle.
Trying to get that going.
It is. Fortunately, our school allowed us, even when we were shut down and not playing, the school shut down all sports for a couple of weeks. But even when we were shut down and not playing games, they were allowing us to practice.
Okay.
So that gave us that opportunity to at least get there and get in the weight room and continue to do those things. So, I mean, for us right now, I mean, it's a 6-day-a-week program, which is, we're lifting on Mondays and Thursdays and practicing Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and playing on Saturdays and or Sundays. So it's been a real commitment for the kids, and they've stepped up and done a great job.
And I'm sure your seniors,
Senior.
You're not taking senior. So you're one. Wow. Okay. One senior. Well, I'm sure he's certainly not taking any of this for granted. I'm sure he's not taking any of this for granted, being that, based on what happened last year, where, so where a lot of kids, both from hockey and then all the spring sports, got wiped out. Have your kids, or even you as a coach, just really imparted and really just thought about just how, really taking it day by day and just and making sure that, hey, we have this opportunity in front of us. We can't let it go to waste, for lack of a better term, I guess.
And I guess first I need to correct myself. We have two seniors. One of them's a first-year player. So but and that's Ryan Britt. But no, it's a constant theme of ours that, but it's not just this year. It's any year. You talk to kids and they don't realize when they start as freshmen how quick it's going to be that they're seniors and their time is over. Year after year, you talk to kids at the beginning of their senior year and they said, holy mackerel, we can't believe that it's our senior year already. And, now you start to talk, especially at this time of the year. We were talking about it at practice the other day that, hey, with the state tournament coming up here pretty soon, we might only have 4 or 5 weeks left in the season. And for somebody that's a senior, and, a number of the kids won't play after high school. So for them, this is really the culmination of their, what I would call competitive hockey, that they might have been playing since they're 4 and 5 years old. So it's a major adjustment, not only for them, but for the parents as well, that have been there watching their kids play. So you treasure every moment that you have and hope that, you can just do as best as you can and walk away saying, hey, I gave it my best.
Now you mentioned.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, you talked about the state tournament that's coming up, and when we were talking before the show started, there is some question on whether, where the Frozen Four will take place. Columbus is having maybe some Nationwide Arena having maybe some scheduling issues or what have you. But, since we know that the Barron Cup is taking place, and for a lot of teams in the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League, that is equivalent to the state tournament. Do your kids recognize, the opportunity for the Barron Cup that's coming up and maybe this season, however weird it's been, that they've come together and they see that as a goal for themselves?
They do. And that's always a goal. I mean, unless you're one of the really top 6 or 8 teams in the state, it's almost inconceivable to think that you're going to make a run at that state championship. So for us and for the other leagues around the state, a league championship, and in our case, a Barron Cup, is something that you really point for. And it's going to work a little differently this year. In the past, teams literally had to qualify for the Barron Cup. But our league has taken a little different approach this year because not everybody's playing the same amount of games. So it's really hard to have standings. So essentially, all the teams will qualify for the Barron Cups in each division. So everybody will have that opportunity. And we were talking about that at practice today, that, hey, the next couple of weeks of games are going to be very, very important for where we get seated when we get to that Barron Cup. So it's very, very important. And I know they're thinking about it and talking about it. And, each team, I think, does this. And we did at the beginning of the season. We met and set some goals for the team. And certainly winning the Barron Cup was one of them. And now we've got some formidable opponents in our division this year. Chagrin Falls has played extremely well at this point, as has Canfield. And so that, those are things that we have to consider. That's our uphill battle at this point.
Now, you've been in a lot of Barron Cups, and I know that's the big tournament that everybody loves in the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League. But, from when you've been with the Barron Cup and in this league for a long time, how has it changed? And I know you have plenty of stories we can get to. Too, with the Barron Cup. But I know Ryan Kelber mentioned that there was a Padua versus Trinity 3 or 4 overtime thriller that he said he wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that. I think, did he say it was in 97? Was that when it was?
There was an overtime game between Trinity and Padua. It was a 3 overtime game. It was 97. I remember the game. It was actually a 3-3 game, and in the third overtime, at the beginning of the third overtime, we actually scored, and it got waved off. And about maybe 2 minutes later, a guy that's now the head football coach at Berea Mid-Park.
John Hunick.
John Hunick.
Friend of show.
Yeah.
Came down and scored at the other end and won the game for him.
Oh, man.
And,
goodness.
It was a phenomenal game. We had at Trinity a kid by the name of Anthony Ballamente, who was just phenomenal. He was about 5'6", and he was the player of the year in 97 in Cleveland. He had 70 points that year, and in his 4 years in his high school career, he had 1 penalty. And you think things like that happen all the time, and we were playing at Miami at Thanksgiving time, and they challenged his stick when he had a hat trick, and he got a penalty for that. That was
wow.
It was a great hockey game, us against Padua that year, the Barron Cup. He was right, but that wasn't the longest game that we had ever played there. There was a game that was just as memorable, and it was 89. It was 1989. It wasn't Barron Cup, but it was state tournament, and we were an underdog that year, and we ended up playing St. Ed's. in the district finals to go to the Final Four. And we were down 3-0 going in the last period. And I know we talked to the kids before the start of third and said, hey, just give it everything you got. And, you leave everything out there. And if we don't succeed, okay, that's great. Well, we chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And with about 5 minutes to go, tied it up. And then in the fourth overtime, which at the time was the longest overtime in the state tournament, I know the game started at like 8 at night and didn't finish till after midnight. And in the fourth overtime, we scored to beat them to go to the Final Four. And it was just a phenomenal night. And, St. Ed's, of course, had a great and classy program. And Bob Whitten was their coach. And he couldn't have been more gracious at the end of it. But it was just a real memory that we had and an interesting night.
Man, that's crazy. Going into all these overtime games, I'm sure, the kids probably loved it and will never forget it either. Those are the memories you love and remember.
I got a funny story about that one, too, because the next week, and St. Ed's was rated number 1 in the state at the time. No, they were number 2. Padua was number 1. And the next week, in the semifinal game, we had to play Bowling Green, who was the number 3 team in the state. And we're winning that game 3-2 with about 7 minutes to play in the game. And one of my assistant coaches, Kenny Beilstein, who was a phenomenal assistant coach, was with us for all 32 years at Trinity. He whispered in my ear, he said, Coach, it's the last couple of minutes. We're up 3-2. You got to get your third line out there so we can rest the first 2 lines for the last couple of minutes. And I looked at him and I said, you're crazy. We're going with our first 2 the next 7 minutes. We got, and he just kept whispering and whispering. Finally, I said, okay, we'll do it. I put the third line out there. 30 seconds later, it was 3-3. And I almost lost my mind. I looked at him on the bench and I said, Kenny, if I ever listen to you again in my lifetime, call me crazy. And we ended up winning that game in overtime. But as a real sad note on that, I don't know if you guys saw that a week ago, Bowling Green's coach Jamie Ruffner passed away from cancer. Yeah. And I remember Jamie. Jamie was a senior winger on that Bowling Green team in '89, and I remember him very well in that game as a really tough, gritty winger. And so it was sad to see that happen last week, but it reminded me back of that game again.
So, Coach, you spent 32 years at Trinity. You started the program, and you were there when it ended. Yep. There you saw a lot. You went through a ton of experiences, but just talk briefly about what it was like to start a program and see it through through the end. Because there's not a lot of coaches that are able to say that or have done that.
Well, I will tell you that for 32 years, I was honored with what I thought at the time was the best coaching job in the city of Cleveland. I was hired by an athletic director by the name of Bob Wolf, who was the football coach at the time. And I ended up coaching football with Bob as well after that. But Bob knew that hockey was going to be an integral thing for a young school. Trinity back at the time had only gone co-ed in, I think, 1974 or 5. And this was 1979. So it was a way for them to attract more kids and do some things. And not only Bob, but then John Call, who also ended up being president of the league for a while, was the athletic director after Bob. And they and the principal, Sister Catherine, just allowed us to build the program and gave us all the support we needed. We were real fortunate. In fact, for a number of years when I taught at the school, our kids would get eighth period off. And so we'd actually be able to go over to the rink at 2:30 and practice, have great time to practice every day. And the school was incredibly supportive of the program. And I think we did a nice job for the school as well. I mean, we were certainly an underdog team and, had some great players over the years and challenged and fought with the best of them, but never made our way up into the red division until literally the 2000s when we made it up there. But you got to remember, too, how the league was formed back then. When we started in 1979, there was only 19 teams in the city of Cleveland. I remember going to the first coaches meeting, and Bernie Hovey was kind of the coaches representative from Kent Roosevelt. And our meeting was held in one of the locker rooms at Brooklyn. That's how small it was. And then and in the state of Ohio at the time, there was only 39 teams at the time in 1979. So back, where now there's 85 or 84 teams, it grew so rapidly, and even in Cleveland, our league grew from 19 teams to 46 teams by the mid 2000s, and it was great to be at a school where athletically they supported it. We were in a nice central location. We had a phenomenal youth program at Garfield Heights that led a lot of kids to come to us at Trinity. And I was really blessed with great assistant coaches and just great kids over the years. There were some real highlights over the years. We fortunately had a couple kids who ended up making their way to the pros. Jeff Brzezinski, who ended up playing for the Monsters, or at the time it would have been the Lumberjacks, excuse me.
Oh yeah, me and Josh remember a few good games going
Sure.
to the Lumberjacks games.
Jeff played for us, and then went and played a year in the NAHL and one in the USHL, and then was a captain at Western Michigan, Division One. He ended up playing in the ECHL and AHL, and he's a local area youth coach now, just in a business exec for Dell. So he's just doing a great job. And we had a couple other kids, and I often talk, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, that we always say there's a trivia question that we mention occasionally that I believe in, and if somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1988, Trinity had the only player ever in Ohio hockey history to actually get drafted by the NHL right off of our roster. In 1988, we had Mark Smith, who got drafted by Winnipeg in the 8th round. He had gone up to play at Hockey Night in Boston earlier, and somebody saw him up there. Mark was a big kid. He was 6'5", about 210. And they saw him, they liked him, and he got drafted in June.
Wow.
So that was really kind of neat, and came from a really interesting hockey family, because his niece right now actually is a starting defenseman at Merrimack College, Division I up in the East.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, so it's just a neat family. His dad was a longtime youth coach, and so we had some kids that did very, very well for us over the years. And the league originally, when we first started, the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League was not red, white, and blue like it is now. It was geographical. There was a Lake Erie League division that had all those teams that were in the Lake Erie League, and then there was an East Side division and a West Side division. And the Lake Erie League had Shaker, Cleveland Heights, and all those teams. Mm. But our first season, I remember at Trinity, our opening game, as a matter of fact, we had to play Garfield Heights. And back then, Garfield Heights was a phenomenal team. It's just some great players. And I had coached in the youth program in Garfield Heights the season before. When I got hired at Trinity, oh my gosh, the names that I got called in the neighborhood, being a trader, going over to the Catholic school, taking a couple kids with me. But I'll never forget that first game. The place was a sellout, because here we were, the new Catholic school playing the established public school, who was really good. And I had 3 players who had played the game before on a roster of 9. 6 of them had never had skates on before the first game. And so we go out against Garfield Heights, and one of them was a great player by the name of Chris Andonian, whose sons actually both played football at Kirtland for Tiger.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and
man.
And Chris takes the opening face-off and goes down and scores. And I'm laughing because I know what's about to happen. 3 periods later, it was 19-2. There was no 10-goal rule back then. And our goaltender, Scotty Brand, who was the other only veteran, one of the 2 veterans that we had, made 108 saves on opening night. And
wow.
The worst part about that was the next day we had to go play Valley Forge, who was pretty good back then too.
Oh man!
And they beat us 21-1, and he made another 89 saves. And I'll never forget, with about 5 minutes to go in the game, he took a penalty. And when he took the penalty, I said, "Scott, what are you doing?" He goes, "Coach, I've had enough." So I was like, "Okay, all right, no problem." But so it was tough starting the program. But after that first year, we started getting some kids in, and within 3 or 4 years, we were very, very competitive as a mid-level team. And it was in year 9 that we made our way to the state championship game. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you've done an incredible job at Lakewood. I believe, in your first year, you only won 1 game, And then the next season, it seemed like all of a sudden things started to turn around a little bit. How has it been starting at Lakewood and then making your way now, getting players to stay on it and getting some new players to try the game of hockey, and is Barron Cup, is that a way to get these kids, if they go to that and see kind of the tournament and how it is that,
Well,
a thing you could show them how fun it is?
yeah, you're certainly right. I mean, the first year we had 7 or 8 players and no goalie.
Oh,
And we
man.
actually had to take a defenseman and put him in goal. And I was telling our players the other day, our goal in that first year was to make it to the third period. And it was
Wow.
it just to get there.
Wow.
And we did. We actually won 2 games that year. And what really turned it around the next year was the incoming freshmen that came in. We had 3 incoming freshmen come in, the 2 Holden boys and another player that was a defenseman. And all of a sudden, when we had an established goaltender, now you're in games, and now you're able to play and you're able to do some of those things. And little by little, we started winning some games, and you start winning some games, and the kids in school start talking, and then they come out to watch a game, and you win a game, and they see it's exciting, and then all of a sudden, you're getting kids saying, "Hey, I'd like to try hockey," and probably every year, we get at least 2 or 3 kids that are first-year skaters to play, and we don't cut anybody, so I mean we're real happy to have them, and they fit in nicely. But again, like I was mentioning earlier, some of those kids that maybe would have gone earlier are now starting to stay, and that's what's making us a little bit better. I think that this group with only one really senior regular on the team is even going to be better next year. So it's things happen. Winning makes some of that happen. Kids start to say, "Hey, it looks like fun." They come to a game and it's exciting, and they say, "Hey, I want to be a part of that." So,
Coach, you mentioned that the league kind of blew up from 19 teams to, or at least the city area, blew up from 19 teams up to the upper 40s. Why do you think that happened, and when it happened?
well, it's interesting. If you look at youth hockey, USA Hockey looks at these things all the time. You often see a surge in kids every 4 years after the Olympics, and especially after 1980. After 1980 and all that, there was a surge of kids that started to play. And USA Hockey has put a tremendous emphasis every year now on the retention of kids and what do we need to do to keep kids playing. And I think that has been a part of it. There was a big surge also in '84. Even though the U.S. didn't do well in the Olympics that year, there was a big interest. And every 4 or 5 years, and now you're starting to see with the World Juniors and things like that, where USA is just getting better and better and better. We're starting to see more and more kids play the game. The difficult part about it is the expense. It's still a very expensive sport for a young parent to play. I mean, we often say, a lot of times young parents, they'll look at a kid in hockey and they have to spend, you got your hockey fees and then maybe another $300-400 worth of equipment to get started, even for a young guy, and when you include the skates. Or can I spend $25 and a pair of shorts and they can play soccer or something else? And so the attractiveness has to be there for the sport. And USA Hockey has done everything they can to make it as affordable as they can. And if you'll allow me for a minute here, I'm going to give you a shameless plug that a number of my former Trinity players and I have just started and put together something called the Trojan Hockey Foundation. And what we want to do with that is we're going to start getting out and getting some grant money. And our goal is to raise money and give it to local area kids who otherwise would not be able to afford to play the game. And that's a lasting mark we think we can make, on the area. And I even solicited my good friend Jimmy Cooper, who was the coach at Sylvania Northview for so many years, to sit on our board with us. So, we'll be getting a lot of information out about that real soon. But our goal is just to get more and more kids playing. I mean, I'm kind of looking at it all over again. I have a 5-year-old grandson who's in his first year playing in the ADM program out of Gilmore this year, and it's just a blast to go out and watch him play and see the young kids do that. So I think that's where the level of kids has started to grow, and so we're working hard to retain those kids. That's the biggest thing. A lot of kids will start to drop off at like ages 11 and 12. They start to specialize in certain sports. And we think that specialization is really silly. Um, you need to be a multi-sport athlete nowadays. And I guess I can tell this story. I'll never forget uh, one of the players that I became close to, even though he didn't play for us, was Brian Holzinger, who played for Padua. Brian, I don't know if you know, was the Hobie Baker Award winner when he played at BG, and then he had a
Yep.
great career in the NHL. Played for Buffalo for a number of years, and also Columbus and Pittsburgh. And I'll never forget, I was at Jeff Brzezinski's wedding, and Brian happened to be sitting there with his wife and Jeff's college coach from Western Michigan. And I looked at him, I said, Brian, I got to ask you a question. A lot of coaches are telling these kids nowadays that they have to specialize in hockey, when they're 8, 9 years old, and they got to do this. What do you think about that? Because Brian, when he was in high school, played hockey, football, and baseball. And he looked at me, he says, Coach, that's craziness. He said, by the time April comes around, I want to do something else. I want to try something else. And you start to look at the camaraderie and the exposures you get with other sports as well. And it truly makes kids better rounded athletes. And so I think that's the thing we need to keep pushing. I know at Lakewood, I'm constantly, telling our kids, hey, play another sport, play baseball, play. We've got a few kids. I think this year we've got 4 playing football as well. I think that's great. So we need to do that, and we need to keep working at that in the hockey world.
Absolutely.
Well, Coach, speaking of, the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League, there's well over 30 teams in the league. We've talked about it before that a lot of the teams that are in high school hockey are in Northeast Ohio. And, we try our best here at Sports on Tap to keep, get the word out and cover hockey. Why do you think, in your honest opinion, you've been around for a while, why do you think hockey just doesn't get, the coverage, let's say, other sports do? Because it's so big. There's a lot of tradition. And I just, in your opinion, in your humble opinion, why do you think that is?
Even at the major league level, in a lot of cities, the NHL is not considered as a top sport. You're looking at football, basketball, and baseball in many major cities. I mean, to be candid, look at publicity here in Cleveland. I mean, we have literally gone from having a writer that was covering hockey every weekend years ago. Don Friedman did, and we had a couple other guys that covered it for the Plain Dealer as well. And all of a sudden, they stopped and started covering, I guess, with their economics and the demographics, they started covering football and basketball. Now, if you look, for example, at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, even Cleveland.com, you see high school football and basketball and very little else. And that really upset us a few years back, and a number of us have written numerous letters to some of the local media. But you've got some of the outlying papers who start to cover it very, very well. I mean, the Lorraine Journal, I think it's James Brady out there, covers it very well. And also the Willoughby News Herald has a great writer out there that covers hockey and does a fabulous job with it. We just wish it could be that there's not as many inner city schools that are playing hockey. Literally within the city limits of Cleveland, I don't think there are any, that are playing, and I think that's probably got something to do with it. So you got to look at the outlying rims, the outlying suburbs for some of that coverage. Kent Ravenna Record Courier covers hockey quite a bit too. So we just have to keep working in those areas, and I know you guys have helped dramatically. I know that Ryan Kelber, as president of the league, and Joe Simon, when he was the executive director of the league, did a great job trying to get the publicity out and do those things. And now with a lot more things coming online and watching games through the internet, hopefully you're going to start to see some of that spread. But we just have to keep selling ourselves as a big sport all the time. And I've coached multiple high school sports, and to me, hockey is as exciting as any of them. And so we just got to keep doing our job. I'm not going to blame anybody else. I'm going to say that we have to keep promoting, and we have to keep getting out there, making it known.
Like, Coach, I mean, we've been covering the Barron Cup for the last couple of years, and we did more coverage than we ever, I think, than we ever did,
Sure.
last year than we did in years past. And I can tell you, I can tell you from experience. I mean, those games are awesome. I
Oh,
mean, those are, I mean, like we were covering, and we're not even talking about just the Barron Cup games, like the finals. We're talking about some semifinals and quarterfinal games. You know, a lot, as you said before, a lot of the, this is the preeminent tournament for, for this area, and the fans get into it. The players just, they sell themselves out. I mean, it's like watching playoff hockey on TV. I mean, playoff hockey, there's nothing like playoff hockey. I'm not the biggest hockey fan in the world, Coach, not gonna lie, but when it
all
comes
right.
playoff time, I love watching playoff hockey.
Well, and again, even if you look at things of the National Hockey League, during the regular season, you might see a lot of 7-5s and 5-4s, and you get to playoff times, you're seeing 2-1, 3-2. Teams are tightening down and really playing that way, and it's so exciting. But you're right, the kids, hockey seems to be one of those sports. When kids play it, they almost never quit playing because of, it combines so many things. It combines speed, agility, toughness, all those things. So,
Well, and not only that, the kids are heavily involved, but so are the parents and the family.
Oh.
In fact, last year when we were covering some Barron Cup games, and we were live, we were doing audio of the games on Mixler. We had parents come up and say, "This is great. We have family listening, in Michigan."
Right.
I think we had a family that said we had relatives in Canada listening.
Yeah.
So, for us to be able to, spread the word a little bit that way, and allow family to listen to their nieces and nephews, play the game. That's important to a lot of us. At what you said, a lot of people, for a lot of the players, this is the highest level they're going to be at. So that's special.
It is, and we can't. You got to take a look back at some of the guys that really got the league going and kept it going. I mean, it was funny. I jotted down some names ahead of time, but I mean, we had guys early on like Jack Biebelhausen and Fred Heyer, who just passed away, who was a longtime official, was one of the first directors of the league, and a guy by the name of Dick Homovic was an executive director, and Jerry Masteller, the old AD at Shaker, was just a key person in keeping our league going, and these guys were real titans of the sport, and kept it moving for these kids, so that so we can have what we have today. And the OHSA, I think too, they take a lot of criticism for some of the things they do to administer some of the sports. But I will say when the league continued to grow, and back around 2000 when the Blue Jackets started, I was on a committee with Jimmy Cooper, and we met with Dwayne Warrens, who was the assistant commissioner of the OHSA at the time, and said, look, back then, there used to be 4 sectionals, if you will, 2 at Brooklyn and 2 at Tamashana on the west side of the state. And all the teams from the state used to go to those 2 sectionals. Like teams from Cincinnati would have to drive to Toledo to play. And the same thing here in this area. Everybody would go to Brooklyn. Well, we met with Dwayne and said, look, if we really want to grow this thing around the state, and Columbus is going to start to grow because of the Blue Jackets, we got to split it up into 4 regional sectionals. And yeah, we're going to take some heat for a while because, there's going to be teams, and it happened. A Columbus team didn't win in the semifinals until I think last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me, when I think it was Dublin Jerome, I think that won. And, we took a lot of heat for that. But, if we had to look out back then and say, if we're truly going to grow this game, we've got to make these moves so we can get more kids from more areas from around the state playing and get them involved. And so you take that, and the guys that led our league and when we're very integral and things like that, I think that's, to your point earlier, how did it grow? I think that's how it grew as well. And I think the other thing, too, is as time went on, you started getting, when there were some economic issues back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you had a lot of kids, saying, hey, maybe I want to stay and play for my school. It's not as expensive, the school's supporting it, this, that, whatever. And that's where, I was at Trinity at the time, and we definitely saw a drop off of kids, coming into play because they would be staying and playing at their local schools. And some people will say, well, the quality of the league has really gone down since then, and because some of those kids, and some of that is a fair statement, because some of those kids that may be a star at one of those schools would be a third line great player at one of the other big schools. But you know what? You have to allow those schools to grow, and you have to allow those kids, they want to play for their own home community and whatever. It's a big deal. When all of a sudden our kids go into school on a Friday and their locker is decorated, and the announcements and the buzz going on in school, that's huge for those kids. And and also in their community, that our kids will walk into Angelo's Pizza in Lakewood with a hockey jacket on. The owner there is so supportive of all the sports, they'll get recognized right away. And so that's, I think, is what's helped us to grow, and we got to continue to do that.
And you're talking about growing a little bit, with the Barron Cup and the different leagues. It seems like every year they're trying to add teams, and you have added teams in the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League. How much has it grown from when you first got involved in the Greater Cleveland High School League till now?
Like I said, 1979, there was 19 teams. A couple of years ago, before a couple of teams split off and formed the Great Lakes League, we had 46 teams. Wow. And then there's also a number of club teams that are USA Hockey, or it's USA Hockey Varsity, but they're not affiliated with OHSAA schools. So we more than doubled the league in a 25-year period of time. And you've had some teams come and go, like Trinity, left, and a couple other schools have dropped. Lake Catholic, for example, a couple of years ago, and a couple other teams have dropped, and so we're trying to keep those teams going. You're trying to get the youth programs. I see coaches I coach in the youth program out at Gilmore, and Stevie Bogus from Mayfield. He's constantly working with that youth program, trying to get kids, Mayfield kids, to stay and play, and I commend that. And I think too, one of the other things is you got some real. I think I'll speak for some of my coaches. You got some real great coaches in the league. I mean, I'll make this statement. I don't know a lot of people how well they know him, but John Sheridan, for example, who's the head coach at Aurora. I don't know how many people know. I mean, when you talk about hockey coaches here in the last 30, 40 years, what's the one name that everybody talks about that's a hockey coach? Herb Brooks. Well, I'm not sure everybody knows that John Sheridan played for Herb Brooks at Minnesota, was on a national championship team at Minnesota, and played in the World Hockey Association for the Indianapolis Racers. And so you get guys like John that are not everybody knows how good a coach he is, and you got a whole lot of great young coaches around in the area. I think that Pat certainly does a nice job at Ignatius, and Timmy Sullivan at Ed's does a great job, but at even some of the smaller schools like Doug Fairchild out at CVCA, outstanding coach, to go against. And so I think the kids are getting a good experience when they play for a lot of these teams nowadays. And so we just got to keep it going. We got to keep some of these schools fueled with players. I heard West Geauga might be coming back again next year. They're trying to, they dropped their program a couple of years ago, but they're working and trying to field it coming back. So hopefully that's going to keep going.
Yeah, and quickly on our Facebook page, we have Caleb Samuel Wise, who said Ferf is a legend, is what he said.
Not really. Caleb, I'll tell you, you want to talk about Caleb. Caleb was a fine player, and then a great coach at Orange and at Hudson. I mean, I remember playing against Caleb when he was playing for Cleveland Heights, and John Malloy was their coach, and boy, we had some battles with those guys. Caleb, just outstanding player, and I know he was hockey director at Shaker there for a while. But I think he's out of coaching at the moment, but hopefully he's the kind of guy that we want to see him back in coaching. Guys like that, you just got to see him in the game. We just got a lot of those good guys that I want to see again. So.
Yeah, and you know what? Talking to a lot of the coaches, I know last year I did a lot of phone interviews with coaches who, were working out of town, but then they would come back and immediately have a coaching, in Shaker or wherever it was. I mean, it's dedication by the coaches. You guys put a lot of time and effort. I don't think people realize how much time with practice and with lifting, and then they still have school and everything. It's a lot of time and effort in hockey, but you could tell the kids really love to play the game and the coaches love to coach. And I think you see it in the Barron Cup. I mean, there's been so many great games, and when you get people in the stands and it's jam packed for some of those games, you could tell the kids really thrive on that. It's a great feeling, really.
That's what it's really about. I don't know of any coach who's doing it for the money. We're certainly not doing it for the notoriety, but working with kids is what it's really all about. And there's probably not a week goes by. Like, it was really interesting when I kind of reposted the tweet you guys had out about tonight's call. Immediately I got 2 or 3 emails from former players. Coach, can't wait to listen. Coach, coaches develop relationships with kids because that's what we want to do. Most coaches are in this for a long time, and they really want to work with kids and see them succeed. And so that's what really kind of drives you. Like I said, it's certainly not the money, and it's certainly not the notoriety in hockey, because it's just not there. But a lot of coaches have done just great jobs, and boy, if you look at Ohio hockey over the years, I mean, guys in this area like Bobby Whidden, Doug Hauser, Don Malloy, guys like that, Dick Holmovec, like I mentioned, Ian Cushnan, who just passed away last year. I'll never forget Ian. He was actually an assistant of mine for 3 years at Trinity, and I remember him. It was really funny because we'd get into some pretty deep discussions about hockey. And, Ian was an older guy, and sometimes the kids would look at him and he's, Coach, he's an old guy. But, here's a guy who had a Stanley Cup ring. And, what's the one movie that everybody watches in hockey, right? It's Slapshot. Well, all the players in Slapshot, they talk, Eddie Shore, old-time hockey. Well, you know what? Ian played for Eddie Shore. And he played for some of those guys. And so when a guy like Ian would talk and we'd sit down, you had to listen, and the kids too, you'd say to the kids, just listen to what he says, listen to the advice. And so there's been some great people involved with the league over the years. And Ryan Kelber, I got my hats off to Ryan, because he stepped in to be the executive director of the league a couple of years ago. And he's just done an outstanding job keeping the league going. I mean, this year, especially with all the COVID things going on, it's a thankless job. And his communication with all the coaches and the ADs and what's been happening has just been phenomenal. So hopefully we're gonna see this thing through and get to some Barron Cup winners and get to a state champion. And I guess I should mention that too. There is a lot of talk around the state right now that there's very potentially could be a second division for hockey in the state here within the next year or so. A number of the teams have we've sent proposals, and I know Pat O'Rourke's been involved as well with the proposal down at the state. And I think especially because what you mentioned earlier, that the Barron Cup, or maybe the Toledo, the North Central or Northwest Hockey Conference playoffs are really the playoffs for some of these teams, because they know they're not going to win the states. It's time maybe for us to recognize that, okay, maybe there is another level that needs to happen. And one of the drawbacks when I was on the advisory committee was OHSAA has a bylaw that says you really can't start a second division until there's 150 teams in any sport. But the OHSAA over the last couple of years has been willing to start to talk about it and say, you know what, maybe we can grandfather you guys in, and maybe that would happen. So there's already been some proposals out there how you would determine which team would be in which division, based on my hockey rankings and things like that going into it. So I'm hoping we'll see some movement there here in the next year or so. And being from a school that was a small school that, boy, somehow we were fortunate enough to make it twice. The experience of going to that Final Four for high school kids is just amazing. The thrill of being able to play in front of those kind of crowds. I mean, I'll never forget when we played Padua in the state championship game in '89. Brooklyn, you couldn't get near the place an hour before the game. It was absolutely sold out. People sitting in the aisleways, people 5 deep around the rink. And it was quite a game. In fact, I was thinking about it earlier today. In that game, that day, there was actually 4 players who, within 2 years, would be playing major college hockey. You had Jeff Brzezinski on our team, and you had Perry Cohagen, who's now the coach at Padua, went to Harvard, and you had Brad Holzinger, who played for Padua and literally went to BG, played as well. And you also had Brian Wallace, who ended up being an offensive lineman or defensive lineman for Michigan a couple of years later.
Wow.
So there's just some great players on the ice, and just the thrill of being in that was just something special. And we need to have that for more of our kids. That they need to get that experience of what it's like to do that. So,
Yeah, I think we've, I think we have graduated from the everyone's in the same tournament stage. I mean, you hear about you always. I think probably the most famous movie when it comes to that is probably Hoosiers.
right.
With Milan High School taking on Muncie or South, whatever, Muncie Central, whatever the case was. It's not the 50s anymore. Where there are more schools and there is you have to separate competition a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see it. Some people were actually talking about going 3 divisions, but I think with 85 teams, I'm not sure 3 divisions wouldn't water it down to the point where, what does it mean? 2 divisions, I think certainly is. I would certainly be in favor of that at any point in time.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League has done, and I give credit to, again, Ryan Kelber with doing this, is all the coaches getting together and some teams moving up, some teams moving down. You have 3 different divisions, so I think you see a lot more competitive games when you do that, because like you said, some teams are losing a ton of players, and like Amherst, for example, they didn't have a ton of players, but they seemed to be playing at a pretty high level, and they moved up to see if it was a little more competitive. And I really like that idea, and I think it's great that you have all the coaches and athletic directors involved in talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most kids want to play the best competition they can play. And so most coaches will try and schedule accordingly. Like you want to play. Last weekend we played 2 white division teams. I want to challenge our kids as much as I can. Is the record important? Yeah, somewhat important, but I think it's better that we develop the kids and give them the best experience that they have. So I think you're right. I think when we switched to red, white, and blue, now, unfortunately, when we did switch to the red, white, and blue a couple years after that, that's kind of what caused the teams to break off and form the Great Lakes League.
Oh, okay.
We used to have the rule that, if you finished last in the division, you got relegated down, much like soccer over in Europe.
Yep.
And you had the opportunity to work up. Well, and rightly so, I understood. I was on that side of the house at the time. When you're a private school and you're trying to get kids in, they wanted to have a certain schedule, and they wanted to set their schedule and play, their rivalry teams all the time. They didn't want to have the opportunity to maybe be relegated or something like that, so they broke off and formed their league, and I totally understand. It was totally a move that had to be made. But it's kind of the only negative thing that happened with our league, if you will, in the last few years. But they've done a great job over in that league as well. So,
well, Coach, we appreciate your time today. Obviously, it's been close to an hour, but it's been awesome just to sit down and talk with you. We hope we could do this again very soon. Just to kind of wrap up, everything. You've been around the sport of hockey for a very long time, and just by talking to you, you seem to really enjoy spreading that love of the game to young players, all over the community in Northeast Ohio. It's kind of, this may be a loaded question, but it may be simple. What does the game of hockey mean to you?
It means a sport that is incredibly enjoyable, that is competitive, and that we can teach kids to, just like in their work or their job, to try to give their best. I know the phrase is often said, that sports are a microcosm of life. Well, it really is. It's a team sport where you've got to sell out and you got to give to the team and you got to do what's best for the team to be successful, and you got to do your best. I mean, if we're only as good as our weakest link, if our weakest link isn't doing what we need to get done, it's not going to be so good. So I really look at it as a life sport and a life exercise, not just sports, and that's what we need to do. I know for me, hockey and sports, it's been a driving thing for my family my whole life. I'm pretty blessed right now. My oldest son, Mark Jr., is the assistant prep coach at Gilmore, and he's also the head varsity B coach. And my younger son, Alex, was a college football coach, and now is back coaching at Warren Harding. And my daughter, Amy, actually lives out in Las Vegas. Her boyfriend is the strength and conditioning coach for the Henderson Silver Knights.
Oh, wow.
With Las Vegas as well. So, and my daughter, my youngest daughter, played high school hockey up through her junior year at Walsh. And, my oldest daughter was my right-hand person at Trinity, through all those years, and keep in charge of all the statisticians and whatever. So, and I met my wife. Her dad was a hockey coach at VA St. Joe's. That's how we met. So it's been involved in our life the whole time, and it's been a great experience. And the friendships I've made with coaches, coaches and players, and it's just indescribable. The hockey community is a unique community that I think really respects each other and just gets along great.
Well, like we said, we appreciate you coming on and taking time to talk about, the Barron Cup, the league, Lakewood Rangers hockey, everything hockey here tonight. You're a great ambassador for the game. Obviously we can do this again, and I'm sure we can cover an hour pretty easily at that point in time.
There's a whole lot more stories you could hear that would make you laugh.
Oh, I'm sure.
Things that happened over the years. I got to end with one. I got to tell you. This is one of the funniest stories ever. Dick Holmovec, who you heard me mention earlier, was a longtime head coach at Euclid. And Dick got involved in two things that were really funny. Bernie Holby was the coach at Kent Roosevelt when Dick was the executive director of the league. And Hudson had a coach, I don't remember who it was at the time, Steve Schmitz maybe was his name. And he and Bernie despised each other, absolutely despised each other. And Dick took it upon himself one Christmas to send Steve a Christmas card from Bernie and Bernie a Christmas card from Steve. The next time they met, they were like, "What the heck was that?" And then another time, Dick, he had a goaltender that was pretty phenomenal. His name was Gordy McCants. And Gordy, not only was he a great goaltender, he was a great kid, but Gordy was also kind of a ladies' man. And back at Trinity at the time, we had a statisticians group. We had like 18 or 20 girls that were involved with statistics that, took tickets, did everything, took statistics. And Gordy kind of took a fancy to one of them. So Dick came up to me at one of our coaches meetings and said, "Mark, we got to do something here. You got to get me a piece of stationery with Trinity Hockey on it and your name on it." And I said, "Okay, fine, no problems." So what he did, he took that piece of stationery and wrote a letter to Gordy that was supposedly from this young lady who he had kind of an eye for. And he went to give it to him in class, and he handed it to him, and Gordy was so excited. He looked at the letter, started to open it, and then his head just sunk. Apparently the letter said, "Gordy, I love hockey, I love goaltenders, but I don't like pudgy goaltenders." So I just roared when I heard that from Dave.
Oh, man.
But it was those kind of relationships that we had with kids, and I still occasionally talk or chat with Gordy online, trade messages with him. So there's been a lot of stories, a lot of times over the years, and thank you guys for helping us continue to promote this league. And as you mentioned, sometimes it doesn't get the most publicity, but it's a great vehicle for these kids, and we're so thankful for everything you guys do.
Well, no problem. It's our pleasure. We love doing it, and we'll continue to do it. We love working with Ryan Kelber and all the coaches, players in the league in general, and we always have a lot of fun. And we're happy you joined us here tonight and appreciate it.
I am too. Thank you so very much. And, let's, I got to go now watch my hockey fantasy team tonight. I work for a company that's headquartered in Montreal, and the first 10 minutes of every day, all we hear is whose team is in first, I got to go take care of business there. So thanks again, guys.
No problem. Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Good luck. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's head coach Mark Ferfolia of the Lakewood Rangers hockey program joining us right here on Sports on Tap via Zoom. And guys, just a great interview, and glad we were able to have him on. And, the 50th anniversary for the Barron Cup. It's a special time, and we're glad to be a part of it. Want to thank Ryan Kelber, for including us in, and hopefully, obviously, once things somehow get to being a little bit more normal, we'll get more involved. But what a great interview, and just happy to have him on here tonight.
For sure. Yeah, it's not very, like Josh said earlier, it's not very often you get to talk to a coach who started and ended a program. It speaks to, it speaks to his level of experience and just his, he's seen this league grow, and he's seen this league grow by leaps and bounds. And I thought it was a really good, interesting answer about what his thoughts were of how the league expanded as it did, with the success of the 1980 hockey team, and just, that cycle that goes through. We see the same thing with soccer, at least on the American side. Obviously, soccer is the most popular game in the world, but sometimes the Americans here don't really see it that way.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, I don't see it that way. I love soccer. However, that's one of those sports, though. Hockey is definitely one of those sports in the United States, along with soccer, that it gets a boost every 4 years. I think you say the same thing about some other sports, like curling. No joke, curling.
Yeah.
With the more it's televised, the more people are like, that sounds like fun. We could do that. So that was a tangent there, but regardless, listen to Coach's perspective on where the league has been, where it's going, and everything in between. Just we'd be remiss if we didn't tap that resource, not only for us to learn about the history, but anyone else who is listening to really gain an appreciation for the league.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody that did tune in. I know Caleb Weiss, had a few comments on our Facebook page, and he said what a great interview. He said, Coach, we need more of these former players to get more involved in coaching the game, which I know he mentioned too as well. But it's just very cool to have him join, and also to have people watching and listening. We had a lot of people watching it, and this will be back up on Facebook, and we'll also archive it in our YouTube page, where you can go back and replay it and watch it again. It'll be on our website as soon as we can. I know things take a little bit of time, but we'll get them up as soon as possible, and we'll see if we can line up another interview. I know Ryan Kelber said he would, maybe come on at some point and talk a little Barron Cup once the seedings and everything are underway, and I know he's busy getting through with that right now. So a lot to look forward to, and like I said, we're trying out some new things this year, since it's a kind of a weird year. But the Barron Cup and the Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League are continuing to move forward and move on and do a great job. So we're glad to be a part of it. Any last thoughts, Josh or Ed, before we close down the show here?
Once again, thanks to Coach Ferfolia for coming on. Always
Absolutely.
great talking to him. Just a wealth of knowledge. Like Ed said, learning about the league, and what better way to learn is from firsthand experience. So that's how you do it. So I hope those who did tune in, or those who will watch it, will get some great useful knowledge of not only about the league, but the game of hockey itself, which is one of the greatest games out there. So I really appreciate that. Looking forward to the Barron Cup. We will be there in some form or fashion, either doing audio or live streaming the game. So looking forward to that as well. And you know what? To be honest with you, it's really good seeing you guys. I haven't seen you in such a long time, so it's good seeing your somewhat smiley faces.
I know it's been a while, but like I said, it's good to be back with everybody, and you know, we'll have him on again. There's no doubt about that. He is a wealth of knowledge, like you said, and great stories. I mean, you could sit there and just listen all day to those stories and get some laughs, but the history of the game in high school hockey in this area, in the Barron Cup and Greater Cleveland High School Hockey League, is just it's fun to hear it and listen, and what a great interview it was. So
I'm just impressed how many names he remembered.
Yeah, really.
That is unbelievable to me, and I'm a little disappointed that he forgot the one name, Steve Schmitz or whatever his name was.
Yeah, that. Geez, I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. But thanks again, Coach. I appreciate it.
Okay, no problems. Thank you.
Yeah, great interview, and appreciate your time here tonight. That's for sure.
Okay.
Have a good rest of your week, everybody, and thanks for listening. For Ed, Dick, Josh, Jeffy, Sean Duffy's out on assignment, Coach Ferfolia for joining us here tonight. We're Sports on Tap. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you again real soon.